In this video, I'm going to show you how to multiply and divide mixed numbers. So let's say we had 7 times 2 over 9. How would we multiply this? Well, to multiply fractions, it's not that complicated. We just have to multiply the numerator of the first fraction by the numerator of the second fraction, and the denominator of the first fraction and the denominator of the second fraction. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. So 7, we can write it as 7 over 1. Okay, so now to multiply these two fractions, we just have to multiply the numerators together. So 7 over 2, 7 times 2, is 14. So that's 14, and that's the numerator of our answer. Over, and then we just multiply the denominators together. So 1 times 9 is 9. So 7 over 1, or 7, times 2 over 9 is 14 over 9. Okay, it's that simple. So let's look at another problem. So let's say we had 2 and 2 over 3 times 1 and 1 over 2. So this problem is a little bit more complicated because we have mixed numbers. Okay, so the trick to deal with these type of problems is to first convert the mixed numbers into improper fractions. So write all mixed numbers as improper fractions. Okay, so how do we convert this into an improper fraction? Well, we just multiply the whole number by the denominator and then add the numerator. Okay, so that becomes the numerator of our improper fraction. So 2 times 3 is 6, plus 2 is 8. So we have 8 over, and then for the denominator, we keep the denominator of the fraction. Okay, so 2 and 2/3 written as an improper fraction is 8/3. Okay, so we do the same thing with 1 and 1/2. So how do we convert this into a improper fraction? Well, we multiply 1 by 2, which is 2, and then we add a 1, which is 3. So 3 is our numerator, and our denominator again is the same denominator as in our fraction. Okay, so 1 and 1/2 is the same thing written in improper fraction form as 3 over 2. Okay, so now we can multiply them easily, because remember, when we multiply fractions, we just multiply the numerators, and that becomes the numerator of our answer. So 8 times 3 is 24, and then over 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, so 24 over 6 is the answer to 2 and 2/3 times 1 and 1/2. And we were able to do this because we converted our mixed numbers into an improper fraction. Okay, so how do we deal with division now? So let's say we had the problem 7 and 3 over 4 divided by 1 and 1 over 2. Okay, so how do we deal with this problem now? It's the same thing. We first have to convert all our mixed numbers into an improper fraction. Okay, so that's the first step. So let's convert these into an improper fraction. So 7 times 4 is 28, plus 3 is 31. So we have 31 over 4 divided by 1 times 2 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So we have 3 over 2. Okay, so now the important thing to remember with division is it doesn't work like multiplication. So you can't just divide the numerator by the numerator of the second fraction and the denominator of the first fraction by the denominator of the second fraction. What we do to divide fractions is actually multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. What do I mean by that? Okay, so we have 31 over 4 divided by 3 over 2. So 31 over 4 divided by 3 over 2. To find the answer for this, we have to multiply 31 over 4 by 2 over 3. Okay, so we essentially have to change the division problem into a multiplication problem. Okay, so now when we change that, now it's the same thing as multiplication, right? Now we can just multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators, right? So 31 times 2 is 62, and then 4 times 3 is 12. So 62 over 12 is the answer for this problem right here. So to find the answer, just to recap, we converted the mixed numbers into improper fractions, but then I said that we can divide fractions like we do multiplication of fractions. We have to convert this in this problem into a multiplication problem like that. So how do we do that? Well, we keep the first fraction the same, okay, and then we multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction, okay? So the reciprocal just means you write the denominator as the numerator for the new fraction and the numerator as the denominator of the new fraction, okay? So for example, let's say I had 5 over 8 and I asked you, what is the reciprocal of 5 over 8? So the reciprocal of 5 over 8 is just 8 over 5, okay? So you just flip the fraction, okay? And let's say we had 2 over 9. So what's the reciprocal of 2 over 9? The reciprocal of 2 over 9 is just 9 over 2, okay? So let's do another problem. So let's say we had 7 and 6 over 2 plus 2 and 1 over 5. Or, sorry, not plus, multiply. So let me just change this into a multiplication. So 7 and 6 over 2 multiplied by 2 and 1 over 5. How would we do this? Well, remember, we have to change the mixed number into an improper fraction first. So how do we change this into an improper fraction? Well, we have 7 times 2 is 14, plus 6 is 20. So we have 20 over 2, okay? Times 2 and 1/5 is the same thing as 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 is 11. So 11 over 5. So now we just multiply these together, right? So 20 times 11 is 220. So you get 220, and then 2 times 5 is 10. Okay, so our final answer would be 220 over 10. Okay, so let's say we want to divide these two fractions. So 7 and 6 over 2 divided by 2 and 1/5. Well, first of all, for any problem, you have to convert it into a improper fraction. So the improper fractions would stay the same. So we would have 20 over 2 divided by 11 over 5. Now, what do we do from this step? Well, remember, to divide fractions, we have to multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction, right? So that gives us 20 over 2 multiplied by the reciprocal of the second fraction. The reciprocal of the second fraction is 5 over 11. Okay, so we essentially changed the division problem into a multiplication problem, but that's okay because this is how we can get our answer. Okay, so just to finish the problem, 20 times 5 is 100, and 2 times 10 is 22. So the answer to our problem is 100 over 22. Okay. So there's actually another method that you could use to divide fractions, and it will also work. So I can show you that method. So let's say we had 31 over 4 divided by 3 over 2. So this is another method that you can use to divide fractions. Although I'm not a big fan of this method, it will work. So what you have to do is first find the common denominator of these two fractions. Okay, so to find the common denominator, we have to use, just to recap, the lowest common multiple, right? So I'm not going to go through the whole process of finding the lowest common denominator, but the lowest common denominator, if you go through the process, should be 4. Okay, so essentially this problem becomes 31 over 4, if we write both fractions in terms of their lowest common denominator, it becomes 31 over 4 divided by 6 over 4. Okay, so we've rewritten these two fractions in terms of their lowest common denominator. So now once you have done that, you have to divide the numerator of the first fraction by the denominator of the second fraction. Okay, and that gives you the answer of this problem. So what do I mean by that? So since now we've written both fractions in terms of their lowest common denominator, we have to divide the numerator by the numerator. Sorry, we have to divide the numerator of the first fraction by the numerator of the second fraction. Okay, so we have to divide 31 by 6. And when we do that, that will give us the answer to our problem. Okay, so what's 31 divided by 6? Well, how many times does 6 go into 31? It's the same thing as me asking you 31 over 6, right? Because this division, we can represent it as this line here in math. So 31 divided by 6 is the same thing as 5 wholes and 1 over 6, right? So 6 goes into 31 5 whole times, and there's 1 left over, and we write that as 1 over 6, right? Because we keep the denominator of the improper fraction. Okay, so just to recap, when we want to divide fractions, we can use this alternate method. So we write both of our fractions in terms of the lowest common denominator by finding the lowest common multiple. Okay, so this is what I'm doing here. And then basically that's all we do. We don't go any step further with the lowest common denominator. Now all we have to do is just divide the numerators of the fractions. So that's what I'm doing here. 31 divided by 6 is equal to 5 and 1 over 6. And this is our answer for 31 over 4 divided by 3 over 2.